Also, don't let the history of abuses of spiritual leadership move you to dismiss what God so clearly says here. We all know, history is full of accounts of how spiritual leaders have abused their authority to manipulate and coerce people, to enhance their status, to get their egos stroked, and sometimes even to line their pockets. Those are legitimate concerns. And in fact, those are concerns that the Apostle Peter would join with you in forbidding. Because he goes on to say the three things how pastors are not to lead. Look in verse 2. They're to shepherd the flock, serving as overseers, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, or better translated, just as God does. In other words, pastors must guard against the need to be motivated by others. They must guard their hearts from the need to sort of feed off the pats on the back or the pushes from people to press on in their hard pastoral work. And you have to keep in mind the historical background of 1 Peter, because he's writing this to persecuted churches. And if a pastor needs to be motivated by men, then what happens when the praise and the pats on the back begin to decrease and the pressure and the persecution begin to increase? Well, I'll tell you what happens. They'll either head out like the hired hand we read about in John 10 who sees the wolf coming and then leaves the sheep, or they'll burn out because their supply of ego boosts have run out, or in lesser forms, they might turn inward into this sort of self-pity and as a way to sort of subtly elicit the strokes from people that they feel they need. Oh, woe is me. Oh, no, but it's all right, Pastor. It's okay. Yeah, oh, thank you. No. Instead, pastors must pastor willingly, it says, of their own free will, even as God does. And what do we see Christ, the chief shepherd, exemplifying when he was on this earth? He said, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and accomplish his work." That needs to be the perspective of elders. My food is to do his will. Paul exemplified this as well in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 when he says, "Necessity is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I'm still entrusted with a stewardship." He was driven by a Christ focus to fulfill God's will. So pastors must not pastor for the praise. But secondly, they must not pastor for the perks. It says, verse 2, "Not for shameful gain, but eagerly." Now, this is not talking about paying, pastors getting paid or paying pastors well. That's not talking about that, because this is talking about shameful gain. Paying a preaching pastor, a hard-working pastor, is not something shameful. It's biblical. 1 Corinthians 9, Paul says, "Those who proclaim the gospel shall get their living by the gospel." 1 Timothy 5, 17 and 18 says that those elders or pastors who rule well and are devoted to preaching and teaching are worthy of double honor, not just double respect, but pay, he goes on to say. The laborer deserves his wages. It's biblical to pay them, all right? This is not talking about that. It's just talking about a preoccupation with money. It's talking about being motivated by the perks. As pastors, sometimes God's people are the gratitude to the Lord. They give pastors gifts or discounts, special treats, but those things must never be looked to for motivation. And they must guard their hearts. In fact, this word can be translated covetously. Don't do it out of covetousness. See, the problem with being driven by the perks is when the perks subside, then guess what happens? Discontentment begins to rise. The perks are gone. Oh, why am I guess I'm not. And they start feeling discontent. Oh, I don't want to be here. I'm not getting perks. Now, see, Paul the apostle set the example when he's told the Ephesian elders at Miletus in Acts 20, verse 33, he said, I coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel. That's what the conviction of every pastor must be.